you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Poor audio on that stuff.
With that?
Poor audio.
Would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes.
All right.
To the flag of the United States of America.
And to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Scott, you're going to do roll call?
Yes, I will do a roll call of our remote participants to ensure that they can hear us and be heard. Ms. Engman. Ms. Engman.
Here.
Ms. Keating. Ms. Danini.
Here.
Ms. Steckler. You're muted. Ms. Stevens.
Here.
Ms. Strickland.
I'm here.
Ms. Strickland.
Here.
Mr. Hammeister.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes, indeed.
All right, Mr. Abrams. Here. Ms. Robb.
Here.
Ms. Cheese.
Here.
Mr. Trevino.
Yeah, I'm
Ms. Whitman. Betsy.
That it, Scott?
I'm hearing.
That's it.
Scott, we're getting feedback as Zoom participants.
Yeah, I am too, so.
Can you hear us?
Mr. Chair, you're still muted.
Go ahead, Denny.
Okay?
Yeah, I will just point out for our remote participants, if you do unmute and you get feedback, please just make sure you're wearing headphones or turn your speakers down to about 10. That seems to resolve those audio issues.
We're on the public comment. Members of the public are invited to comment.
We did receive one public comment in advance of the meeting that Mr. Frank is going to read.
Mr. Chair, from David Pankow of the Patton Township Business Association. He just wanted to share with the region that Patton Township's Children's Safety Fair is Saturday, October 9th, 2021, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's in the Wegmans Target parking lot at the Colonnade. Everyone in the community is welcome to attend. Admission is free. Lots of fun games, prizes, balloons, and giveaway. Several popular food trucks will be there too. The goal of the event is to provide children with an opportunity to develop positive relationships with our community's police, firefighters, and EMS personnel.
Thank you, David. Others? Not hearing any? New agenda item number 3. Not hearing any? Oh. So you want to do the new agenda?
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I was trying to find the raise hand button. It sounds like I have a little feedback. Maybe it's sounding better now. Yes, thank you, Chair. As you all saw, there's a new agenda item about new agenda items on our agenda, and I'm going to flex that new agenda item to add a new agenda item if you'll allow. Over the weekend, a farmer that is in Ferguson Township brought to me a concern that I then brought to the chair and the executive director, and because of the urgent nature of it, they thought that this would be an appropriate process to get something quickly on our agenda. So I'm going to ask for you to consider, please, and also joining us tonight to honor that request, should we make it, is Molly Sterniolo. I believe I'm saying that properly. I'm not sure though, you can correct me perhaps later. The Center County Penn State Extension Master Gardener Coordinator. And the reason she's here tonight is that we wanted to bring to the entire region the concern of the spotted lanternfly that is knocking at our door. And so we want to add a quick presentation onto the agenda later this evening. Specifically, the chair has thought maybe after our other report, item 7, so adding it to right after item 7. A brief report on the spotted lanternfly given by Ms. Sterniolo, and also the farmer who brought this to me has also joined us this evening and is willing to say a few words should time allow. Thank you very much. So at that, I would move that we add this item to our agenda after item 7.
Do we have a second?
I second. Betsy Whitman.
Is there discussion? Not hearing any, motion approved. Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
add
Mr. Chair, you have to call the question. You get to decide where it goes on the agenda, but it has to be a majority vote of the general forum.
Well, we're putting it after.
After 7, Denny, right after the other report on the task force on policing in communities of color, directly after that.
Point of order. No, what was my procedure mistake? Point of order.
We have to
You didn't call for a vote.
Hold up. Mr. Chair, there needs to be a vote of the general forum to have a majority vote to put it on the agenda. Once it's voted in favor, if it's voted in favor, then you decide where it goes in the agenda.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Chair, Mr. Harden is gainfully trying to get your attention.
A point of order. The chair said, are there any objections to this motion? And there were none, so we voted right then and there. That is the vote. But we did not object to it.
That's the way I interpreted it, yes.
That is not the historical way the general forum is operated, but that's what the chair wants, that's his prerogative.
We should have went to that class.
So it's my.
Sorry, you guys. Sorry for flexing the new policy too strongly. And I'm sorry about that. But thank you for asking the question.
I would place the item after number 7 on the agenda. With the approval of the members. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A new procedure, we gotta get accustomed to this one. We have approval of minutes from August 23. Entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
We have a
Second.
motion and second.
Second, Danelle.
Discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Or if nobody objects.
We have 2 introductions this evening. Who is going to do those?
Mr. Chair, I can start off with the first one. We're really pleased to share with you that we have a new staff member in Center Region Code Administration. Tiffany Baker joined the team a couple of weeks ago. She is the new Administrative Services Manager, and I'll turn things over to Walt Schneider so he can continue with the introduction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to welcome on board Tiffany Baker. She comes to us with a nice solid background in both state government as well as private industry. She has a degree in organizational leadership, and she will be kind of getting her feet wet, and we will obviously have her come out and meet with each of the municipalities here over the course of the next couple of months, so you can get to know her. She is our new administrative services manager, and she'll be working with the front office staff as well as the rest of the staff, working on customer service initiatives and working also with the general public. So we welcome her aboard, and we're excited to have her.
Welcome.
And Mr.
Laura, you introduce Pam?
Sure, I'd love to introduce Pam.
Great.
And welcome Tiffany. I'll introduce Pam Steckler, the newest member of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors. We recently appointed Pam, and she has been, I could let her say a word or two, but she has been a resident of Ferguson Township for a long time and has served in many ways for the betterment of our community, and is a really good voice for residents, and is a previous business owner in the borough, and so we're really excited for her to share her expertise in that matter as we move into looking at ARPA funding and what we can do for businesses in the township. And we're just thrilled to have her with us, and I'll share with at our first meeting, she made a motion which I think is landmark. I don't know if I've ever witnessed that. So welcome Pam Steckler.
Hi, Pam. Elliot, you have a comment?
Oh, that reaction was just applause for the introduction there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I got it. I wanted to say thank you to Laura as well. I hope you can deal with my slowness in this computer land thing, but I'm still learning. And I am thrilled to be on board with the Ferguson Township Board. I think we're gonna do some great things together, so. And I'm happy to be here too. This is a whole new thing for me. So, thank you for the warm welcome.
Stick with us, this is exciting work, so.
Yes, it is.
Okay, number 6.
Thought I would be bored, but I said, no way.
Staff recognition, Eric, are you, Janet?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Engman has her hand up.
Yes, I have my hand up. I wanted to welcome Pam. And also, you're filling out an unfulfilled term. How long will you be with us?
Am I unmuted? Yes. Through the end of the year. That's it. The November election, I am not running in due to health issues and stuff, so I hope we find somebody good to run in November.
Staff recognition, Eric, is that
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think most of the members of the general forum are aware that from time to time we like to recognize staff for outstanding achievements and contributions as they do their job, and I became aware of one recently, and I'd like to turn this over to Carla Stilson from College Township to tell us a little bit more about outstanding efforts by Shelley Motto.
Yes, thanks. So Eric reached out to me because he watches all of College Township's municipal meetings. Thanks, Eric. I noticed I gave a shout out to Shelley. So I'd like to first of all give a big thank you to Shelley Motto for her work as COG's Refuse and Recycling Coordinator, specifically for her assistance with the Greater Center Region's forced service switch from advanced disposal to waste management. As most of you are aware, we began a 5-year contract with Advanced Disposal in 2020. Its recent acquisition by Waste Management has unfortunately resulted in some pickup issues and disappointing customer service. Ms. Motto has deployed her role as Recycling and Refuse Coordinator deftly by taking on a steep increase in customer service calls and working diligently to assist frustrated residents by finding solutions, fighting for our community, and ensuring Waste Management honors the contract that they purchased. For anyone listening in the public who is having trouble with their refuse and recycling collection and the ensuing customer service, please don't hesitate. Call Shelley Motto at the COG, 814-231-3077. And thanks, Shelley, for all you do.
7, Task Force on Policing and Communities of Color, introduced by Mr. Barlow.
Thank you, Danny. I'm going to introduce Dr. Emil Cunningham, who is the Penn State Director of Diversity and Inclusion. He chaired the Task Force on Policing and Communities of Color that was appointed by the Borough State College and Penn State. And I just want to say I participated on that task force, as did Sharima and Candace and several other folks. And it was one of the most interesting and worthwhile things that I have done since I've been on council. And I'm looking forward to seeing Dr. Cunningham prepare this important report that I felt very strongly all of the COG municipalities should see.
Good evening, Dr. Cunningham.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So,
wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you for the introduction, Jesse. I appreciate it. Also want to give my thanks to those who are present on the call today who took part in this development of the report. Also want to thank Dr. Sarah Thorndike and Tom Fontaine, who are on the call as well, who served as the executive sponsors. For some of you who have heard me give this presentation, I apologize in advance. It is the exact same thing. And so bear with me. If I miss anything, please feel free to let me know and chime in. If you want to take control, I'm happy to pass over the proverbial microphone as well. But let me go ahead here and share my screen. And then ask that fun question again. Can everybody see my screen okay with the presentation? Wonderful.
Yes.
fine.
Thank you. And so this is that presentation. It honestly and truly is built off of the recommendations from the Task Force on Policing and Communities of Color. I'm going to go through some just introductions briefly just to explain sort of how we got here, if you will. Our charge on the task force was threefold. First and foremost, it was expressed to us that we were asked to look at the bias and use of force data to better understand sort of what was happening as things were happening across society and across America, about what was happening, particularly within our communities, about bias and use of force as it related to the BIPOC community experiences. Next, we were asked to examine what progress had or had not been made since the 2016 report. Many of you might remember that a 2015 Task Force on Policing and Communities of Color was established, and they delivered their report in 2016. And so the question was asked, how far have we come? Where else do we need to go? What remains unanswered, and what remains a question that we have yet to ask? And then lastly was to, not surprisingly, offer actionable recommendations to improve the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people, and other communities of color community experiences. So that way, we were formulated in that regard. Our work on the task force was really built on trying to build bridges, if you will. The first thing was an expansion of the task force, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about this later. But more than anything, we look to include additional townships, additional municipalities that weren't included in the 2015-2016 task force. This is nothing about the original task force that was created. It was simply, once we got through it, now we realized that we missed out on opportunities to fully understand the whole picture on policing and communities of color. And so it was expanded in that regard to include Patton and Ferguson Township. But once we were engaged in conversations, we then realized that we were still missing folks, that there were still people that needed to be sitting at the table. And so then we included the chiefs of police from both Spring and Bellefonte. So that way we could have accurate representation then from all of our local communities, particularly where our BIPOC communities live. We sought out some legislative insights. This notion that we had representatives from the Pennsylvania Black Caucus engage in conversations with us. And more than anything, it was simply to make sure that, hey, if they are doing work at the Commonwealth-wide level, it's important that we understand exactly what's going on so that way we are moving in step with them rather than sort of out of sync. And then lastly, continual feedback. Folks were reaching out to me individually. Folks were engaging in conversations with their respective municipalities. Folks on the task force were reaching out to others. And so we were always trying to receive feedback and insight on what we might be able to do and things that were within our control. Could we have done a better job? Probably at the same point, hey, hindsight is 20/20, but nonetheless, we always were trying to find ways to bring more folks into the conversation. Now, in order to accomplish all this, we had a really huge committee. I'll get to that towards the end of the presentation, but more than anything, we decided that it made sense to then work in some subgroups. And so because of that, not surprisingly, the first subgroup was to look at and examine what progress has been made. Okay, that was one portion of it. Another portion was to look at the current data analysis, i.e. that use of force and that arrest data, to fully understand what was happening there and understand were there anything that was emerging within the data that we might want to pay attention to. And then lastly, benchmarking and research. We had some folks on the task force who said, listen, there are some things that make you feel good, and that's all well and good. I think many people can agree the fact that you want sort of more officers of color is a good thing. But is that benchmark, is that research, is that actually going to improve the experiences of our BIPOC communities? And if it is, then let's point to it and explicitly say how it's going to do so that way we can say it's verified through the research, through best practices, through what other communities are doing around the country. Now, the recommendations I'm going to get into a whole lot more detail later, so I'm not going to spend time on that right now, but we did have 5. External consultants, diversified workforce, data consistency, training, and efforts to engage with the community. Now, the first section of it, right, is pretty much looking at our findings. What progress have we made since 2016? And the biggest thing that we realized is that more than anything, it was pretty much focused on University Police and Public Safety and State College Police Department. And so we have to keep that in mind, right? That as we're looking at the progress made, and we offer this within the report as well, that it was really focused on those 2 police agencies. And so we couldn't say what Patton, what Ferguson, what Bellefonte, what Spring was doing because they weren't actually included in receiving the initial recommendations. So with that then, we have the 5 key areas that were offered in the first report. Promote greater recognition and celebration of successes as a community. And we noticed that a lot of the agencies, whether or not they were included in the initial recommendations, were doing this. They were engaging various ways to highlight their efforts through letters of proclamation and through letters sent through the CDT and other ways to ensure and let the community know that they were committed to this experience, they were committed to this work. Increased recruitment and retention of employees of color in police departments. UPPS had some success in that regard, and State College Police Department and others didn't necessarily, but also we recognize that they were constrained. UPPS, for all intents and purposes, operates as part of the university, and so has some university capability to do some of that recruiting as well. But what does that look like then, as we talk about later inside the report, and I'll talk about here in this presentation, about what that might mean for some opportunities then for State College Police Department and the other local policing agencies. Provide consistent and ongoing education for Penn State students and employees, residents in the surrounding community, and the local police departments. And what we found is that training was offered regularly and routinely to those who were interested and willing to attend. And I put that in there, and folks have heard me say this before, but it's important to say that it was offered and those who were interested and willing to attend, right? The reality is that, hey, if you're interested in this training, get it to come out. The question is then, how do we get the training to the folks who absolutely need it? How do we get the training to the folks who may not know about it, right? That's where some of the challenges lie. Target outreach and marketing to build and improve stakeholder engagement, right? We say there's movement towards transparency and engagement in community meetings. I think everybody could agree that in many of the community meetings that local police officers are engaged, that senior officials within the police officer agency are engaged. But it's one of those things that if you're in the know, you know, right? Folks will see them at COG meetings, you'll see them at some of your local borough meetings, you'll see them at CDG, you'll see them at run meetings, you'll see them at all these other meetings, CCU, what have you, but they're all there. But the reality is, how do we make that transparent? How do we make sure that people understand that they're engaged in these ways? And then lastly, establish some baseline parameters to develop appropriate metrics to assess improvement. And we noticed there were actually some really good efforts made between UPPS and State College Police Department that we highlight within the report as well. Now, we start looking at the data, the currently available data and what those findings are. And I tell people all the time that I intentionally pull this slide out because it is the one within the report that draws a lot of attention to it. And so, we asked our local policing agencies for their 3 to 5 year arrest data as well as use of force data. And in doing so, we tried to figure out whether or not there was any sort of implicit, unconscious, or some type of bias happening, right? What was the data saying? And at its most basic level, if we're just doing statistics, what we looked at to say is, okay, what is the population of folks that exists? And so if you have a 3% population of African Americans, how much then do they represent for use of force and arrest? And one might surmise that, hey, if you have 3% of the population that represent 3% use of force and arrest, then okay, that's about on par. But if you have 3% of the population and they represent 75% of arrest and 75% of use of force, then hey, something may be going on there that we might want to look into. And so we did that for every single municipality in which we had data from to better understand what was happening. Looking at Bellefonte, a 4.4% Black African American population, they represent about 9% of the arrest rate. In looking at Ferguson, we noticed that there was about a 5% Black African American population. They represented 15% of arrest rate and 12% overall use of force. For Patton, 5% Black African American population at 18% arrest rate and 26% overall use of force. For Spring Township, less than 0.5% Black African American population, but represented nearly 8% arrest rate. State College, about 5% Black African American population, and represented 16% overall use of force. And arrest data was not available at the time. I have been made aware that arrest data is available and that they're more than willing to share it with us. However, if I'm going to be on par with what was offered in the report, I'm going to keep that consistent with what is in this presentation. And so we'll be looking to add that information and data in as we move forward. For University Police and Public Safety, about a 4% student population and about 3% employee Black African American population. They represent 11% overall arrest rate and 50% overall use of force. Now, here's the kicker about this data, and we talk about this in the report as well. The 4% and the 3% are University Park alone. The 11% and the 15% is overall for all of our entire Commonwealth systems. We were not able to get access to the information that would have uniquely identified what was happening at University Park. We're hoping to be able to dig deeper into this information as we move forward to better understand the experiences happening within the local community. Now, of note for sort of UPPS was the firearm deployment, 90%, but the N of 11, right? So we want to make sure that people know that the actual numbers that we're talking about was the second most use of force tactic against Black African Americans behind sort of physical armed restraint. And Asian populations experienced a greater percentage use of force at 38.9% and of 7 than did Black African Americans. And the reason why it's important to note that there is because I want people to know that we actually did look at it for every single racial ethnic group. However, the one that routinely came up within every single community was the greater experiences of either use of force or arrest rate data for Black African Americans. Now, here's the challenge. These are raw stats. The reality is that we don't really know what's going on. We know that we have a fairly transient community that comes through during football season. I think many folks would agree on that. We're not sure if it has to do with that or has to do with other areas. We're not sure if it's higher, these numbers are greater in the fall or in the spring or over the summer. And because of that, then, that leads us to sort of our first recommendation. Now I'm going to jump to the bottom here, which looks at the sort of racial ethnic disparity analysis, picking right up off of the last slide, right? Which is to say that given the data, are these disparities incidental? Are they intentional? Or are there other data points that we absolutely need to better understand them? I've had some really good conversations and some really good insight provided to me by the chiefs of our local policing agencies saying that, hey, you might want to take this into consideration. Or, hey, you might want to pay attention to what this is because we actually don't think it's that much. Percentages are high, but we need to look at the raw end. And I agree with all of that. But the reality is that the only thing you charged with doing is sort of offering the data as we saw it and wanting to make sure that members in the community had the exact same chance to do so. However, we absolutely agree that we need to bring in an external consultant that's going to better help us understand sort of what's going on. And then allow us to be able to devise a plan to move forward. If this is purely incidental, then it's incidental. However, if it winds up being intentional, then we need to devise a plan that's going to allow us to ensure sort of racial and ethnic bias does not continue to play out within our local communities. Jumping back up to the top, this notion of what else can an external consultant help us with? For us, it's what is the perception of community relations, primarily from domestic minoritized communities, as well as non-U.S. citizens. Folks might have seen some surveys go around that highlighted the experiences of local communities, saying it was overall great. But when you look at the data and begin to pull out the demographic experiences, particularly those around racial and ethnic experiences, you realize that it's often those in the majority who are saying things are absolutely great. So then what is that experience like from our domestic minoritized communities and our non-U.S. citizens who live within our community? Because that then might allow us to better understand the experiences writ large for all of our communities that were involved within this report. Better understanding working relationships between local policing agencies, and with a particular focus to large events. I think many folks would agree that if you know about why there is so much of a police presence in football weekends in State College, then you know. You know about the, sometimes all agencies helping out. You know sometimes you bring in state police to help out as well, but you understand that. However, if you are not part of that in the know group, how do you begin to share more transparent insight about what's going on? Are there ways in which we can inform the community about why this is here? Why do you see this more? What does this look and feel like? Case processing. One of the pieces that are completely without our purview, but thinking it's important, particularly some of the faculty members who are part of the task force, saying that we need transparent insight into case processing, focusing then on racial, ethnic, or gender demographic differences. To better again want to understand whether or not there's any disparities coming to fruition, and we're not sure. But we believe that having a better and clearer understanding of that would allow us as a community in order to help move forward. Recommendations, a diversified workforce. I don't think this comes as a surprise to folks that our recommendations mirror that of the 2016 report. However, we say that we should look to do things a little different. Particularly, let's consider what it might look like then for a cluster hire, something that's often done within faculty and staff searches at a university level. But it's the development then of a more unified approach to increasing that structural diversity, right? The notion of what does it look like that if, yes, you're going to hire an African-American officer in State College Police Department, how can we hire one also inside Ferguson and one inside Patton around the same time so they can have their community of shared experiences as well, in order to not only help bring folks here, but also to help retain them, because folks are going through something similarly. Now, we call attention, we recognize that there are challenges related to veterans' preference that sometimes are without our control, but are there ways in which we can help move that agenda forward? We also recommend then considering how do we engage in more targeted recruitment practices. Several chiefs, several members on the task force had some wonderful ideas about how we might move that forward, given some recent history and some recent experience. We also recommend then that a DEI Director Equity Officer be installed, one individual that is guided and charged specifically with helping to advance DEI efforts initiatives across all the local policing agencies. Very similar to what the Director for DE&I, University Police and Public Safety, Iris Richardson, has going on right now, or what our colleague Dr. Saria Chatters is doing within SCASD. This concern then is that you have one individual whose primary job is to focus on the DE&I imperative, rather than trying to add it on to somebody else's whose primary job is police enforcement or community policing. Allow then the ability to bring in an expert who can help advance and move forward a lot of this work. They can then serve as an external support for minoritized communities as well as an internal support for the local policing agencies for our police officers. And then lastly, a mentorship program. A really great idea brought to us actually by our colleague here, Sharima Young, who said they have a wonderful program happening at the Pennsylvania State Police that they actually use not only to improve their hiring efforts, but also to recruit folks in. Because what it's doing then is allowing people to say that we're going to bring you in and develop you over time. So that way you know you have somebody who is intentionally invested in your career journey, in your entire experience. And what does that look like then mirrored on with the cluster hiring, so that way you have mentorship happening all across the entire community at the same time is just another wonderful idea. Now, data consistency. I think you have a question now, you want to wait till the end? I see you have your hand raised.
Let's wait to the end, Dr. Patty. Go, keep on.
Wonderful.
Oh, I have a question. That slide that says minoritized, it makes it sound like you're doing something to somebody, and I'm not really sure that that kind of notation should be there.
I appreciate that question, Elliot. It's a good question. Minoritized communities is different from minority communities as it sort of suggests the systemic level of oppression that exists on those from communities of color. And so it's more current language around the diversity, equity, and inclusion space about how we refer to communities within that regard. Does that help?
I guess, the main thing to me is I just hope it isn't a reflection that people are doing something wrong to other people intentionally, which is horrible.
I would agree with you. Janet, do you want to chime in now as well?
Yes, I would. The only thing that you seem to be distinguishing is the ethnicity of the people. What about age? What about what they are and what they do? In other words, State College may have a distorted quantity of arrests and use of force because of the young population we have. And the fact that the college students are perhaps more apt to get themselves in trouble than, say, I am, for example. So why are you limiting your study to just that one parameter?
Yeah, Jen, it's a great question. Thank you so much. The reality is that's exactly why we want to bring an external consultant in, because the only thing we had access to was sort of gender identity, racial and ethnic identity. We don't have access to those deeper levels of detail that might help us understand, is this something that's more occurring within the younger population? Is this something that's happening primarily because of the students that live in the area, right? Is the Spring Township experience, if you will, to go here, the less than 5% Black African American, but the 8% arrest rate, is that primarily students, or is that residents who live within the area? Because these are all questions that we don't know. And so the only thing I can tell you, unfortunately, is the information that we had access to, which is why I say, straight from a data point, this is what we're paying attention to. But we absolutely need somebody to help us come in to better understand this, so that way we can communicate this to sort of our respective constituencies as we look to try to drive these efforts forward. Does that help?
Yeah, I don't know about the other locations, but State College, I believe, has got statistics on how many people are in which age category.
Absolutely.
You might want to look into that, because we have a huge percentage of people that are like under 25.
Once again, I don't disagree with you, which is why it's one of those things that as a task force we recommend having somebody that can come in and look at that holistically across the board for every single community. So that way, as I was about to get on data consistency, we're looking at things in a very similar fashion.
I have a question, Dr. Cunningham, on the State College data. Does that include the coverage area of Harris and College Township, or just the State College borough proper?
Wonderful question, yeah. It does include the coverage area of Harris Township and State College proper. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So, thank you. So thinking about data consistency, for us, it's looking to try to find ways to consistently collect data across all local policing agencies. What we found is actually when trying to develop, trying to put our report together, we noticed that folks were defining use of force differently. We noticed that the way that people are collecting information related to racial and ethnic identity were different as well. And so then, how can we develop one standard that allows us to now understand what's happening across all of our local policing agencies who were engaged in this? And so, recommendation is to develop and define a data collection standard, as well as to begin collection of traffic stop data. And I should note that I put this in here, even though it's going into place, because the Pennsylvania State Police will now begin collecting traffic stop data. It was not something that was historically done for a number of years. But we want it in this report because we want to say that more than anything, we should also look to then create consistent collection of traffic stop data that allows us as a community to better understand what's going on. And then also data management. The treaties say that we're really asking for transparent management and communication of data. Janet, to your point, I think it's important that we be able to understand and distinguish between sort of what's happening within the younger age group, what's happening within this age group, where are the arrest rates, where is the use of force, but at the same time, we need somebody who's going to help manage that. And so our recommendation is to leverage university resources from OPAIR, our sort of assessment office, if you will, to capture and report consistent data. Because they do have folks who on a regular basis are used to managing very large and complicated data sets. and asking them to then create a sort of public profile that allows us as community members to then go in and understand and see and track, if you will, sort of what's happening around all these different data pieces. Another recommendation was training. This notion of specialized training. And we're simply saying develop a specialized sector for matters relating to mental health, substance abuse, calls involving juveniles, noise complaints, crisis negotiators, domestic violence and assault. And this is not to say that these things don't exist. This isn't to say that you don't have officers who are trained in these ways as well. Our recommendation, however, is to identify a sort of set of folks who are specialized in this, who are constantly called in order to help out and support this. To which point folks say, well, what about the crisis intervention team? To which I would say absolutely. Which is the notion why we have in here a refinement and reevaluation of the CIT to ensure it's meeting its purpose. I think it came as a surprise to many of us who were on a task force that the CIT was up and running, was doing great work, but the fact that so many of us were not aware of it says that how do we ensure then that it's continuing to meet that purpose, that folks who find themselves in need know that such an entity exists, that they can reach out to them. And so our recommendation is to refine and reevaluate how we do that moving forward as a community. And then continuous training. This notion of continued de-escalation and in-service training, in-person new technology with experts and a special emphasis on PSU faculty and staff who are engaged in these efforts. The reality is that we have a ton of folks within our local community who have the expertise, the insight, the knowledge, the research, the background to help provide us with guidance. Our recommendation is simply that we utilize them in order to help move our agenda forward. And then lastly is a recommendation around community, and particularly community engagement. We know that our officers are doing some great things in the community, but we also know that not everybody's involved all the time. And so the recommendation for us is saying how you identify police officers who are required to engage in service hours, if you will, to local nonprofits. We're not saying that you should do this on your own time. We're not saying that you should be sort of required to do something that doesn't feel or seem right for you. We're asking that officers be allowed to choose a nonprofit that they want to support. And at the same time, they're fully compensated for their time as well. Because we wanted to show the overall community that officers are not only for law enforcement, right? But they are here to help serve and protect the overall community, but that looks like getting involved in the community as well. Now, selfishly, while I absolutely admit that I would hope that officers would choose focus areas that are focused on the sort of nature of this report, communities of color, absolutely. And that's just me being selfish. But at the same time, recognizing that it's about making sure our officers can get out there and engage in the community and be seen across our community, engaging with our local nonprofits. Now, our next steps, honestly and truly, share the report to local community to generate discussion and invite feedback. As was noted inside the agenda for today, the report was made public back in July, and we absolutely hope in inviting people to provide information and feedback. The website that you have information to will also link you to the sort of feedback page that allows it to come to me, so that way we can share that information about how we continue to move this forward. The next thing is respond to community calls for transparency by honestly doing this presentation and sharing the information with local council meetings and other key stakeholder groups, so that way folks are aware of what we are aspiring for as an overall community. We want to continue and expand the task force work to support local policing agencies on realizing the successes of the recommendations. That's something that we're looking forward to. And then continue to dialogue with local, statewide, and national groups, including the Pennsylvania legislative representatives, regarding cross-collaborative efforts, once again, just to make sure that we're walking in sync rather than walking out of step with everybody else. Now, I put up this slide here with absolutely terribly small font because I want folks to know just how many people were involved in this task force. And I'm deeply, deeply, deeply appreciative of their work and effort in order to help us bring forward a report that was as robust as we possibly could to ensure that we were meeting transparency calls. But without these folks, we absolutely would not be here. And so thank you all who were on this call, Streamless and Trees, Chessie, others who I can't see on the screen right now. I really appreciate your effort and your help. But I just wanted to know that this is out there as well. And with that.
Questions of Dr. Cunningham? One quick round, please.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Lafer and Ms. Stilson have questions in the room.
Okay, go ahead.
This is a really nice start, and I have seen it before and I have read it. But I think you just pointed out one of the biggest problems we have as a region, statistics. We do not have enough information, and if we gathered it, it would sit in piles and boxes somewhere, or on a computer forgotten somewhere getting dusty. So my suggestion is that we find you or a member of Dr. Barlow's department, statistics, or whomever. But Penn State has the kind of research computers that we need to do this kind of very large, very complex data collection and analysis. And I see no reason why we as a community should not work together to get grants to support somebody's research project, probably with some undergraduates who can get some hands-on experience of what it really means to collect data at its most boring perhaps, or perhaps its most interesting. It's hard to tell. This topic is very interesting. But I think that if that's what we want, instead of going out and looking for somebody to make this his or her thing that we have to divide up how we're going to pay for, that we find a way to work with the university and with a researcher such as yourself who actually knows how to do this job, and a statistician who knows how to interpret the numbers to make them work, so that when you write up that list and you start quantifying and slicing and dicing, they make sense. I think it's a really good idea, and given the national interest in this problem and how to resolve it, I think that we can probably find some relatively generous grants, which is also time-consuming, I understand that, to support this, rather than suddenly having a very large bill plop down on all of us during the middle of a pandemic and the period as we try to recover from it. So I agree with what you're saying we're missing. And it's true. We can say it looks like a lot of the trouble was on the weekend when 10,000 extra people showed up in the neighborhood and 100,000 people showed up in the stadium, but we don't actually know that. And so those are really big numbers. And I think that we really need to decide seriously as a COG and with the university to make this a very serious research project, maybe a dissertation or two before somebody's done. But I think that it should not just be, yeah, we need to collect more information, let's hire Ms. or Mr. So-and-so and give that to them as a job, because I don't think that they can handle it with that type, without more support.
Thank you, Teresa. Carla, you next?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I just want to give a thank you to Dr. Cunningham. Excellent. That was the first time I saw that presentation. It was excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. So we are College Township right here. That's who we represent. There too. Thank you. And I'd also like to point out Harris Township. So we contract, as you know, with the Borough of State College Police Department. And I have to express slight amount of, I guess just a request. I'm not even going to say it's sadness or anything. I just request that as we put these reports forward and these presentations forward, please call out College and Harris Township, because our residents who are members of the BIPOC community might be watching and they have no idea they're represented in those numbers. You know, that we're representing Spring Township and Bellefonte, and I'm so glad that you opened up that the research area. That makes a lot of sense. I'm on that. But I really would appreciate both Harris and College Townships being called out as this moves forward, just so that we can have that transparency with our communities. It would also be nice if somehow, if it's ever a possibility that data could be broken out for those specific townships, For instance, looking at your numbers, I had so many questions. Just when you're talking about State College, like, okay, so whose numbers are you including? And you said everybody's, but then I still had a ton of questions. So yeah, some of that, not that you have to drill it down into a whole lot of detail, just let us know what's going on. Yeah, so thanks for all you're doing. I'm on board. I'm not interested in waiting forever for all the data in the world. I'm interested in moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Dr. Cunningham, other questions of Dr. Cunningham? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Del Corso.
Hi, Danielle Del Corso, Half Moon Township. Thank you, Dr. Cunningham. Related to a little bit of what Carla had mentioned, in Half Moon Township, well, actually, I just wanted to ask about the defined policing area. You had mentioned, I think in the report, that it was local policing agencies. And in Half Moon Township, we do not have a local policing agency. The state police helps us out. But I didn't know if there was a defined area that you were looking at and the policing agencies within that area.
Thanks for the question. When we look to capture the data, we capture the data from what our chiefs of police and others within the local policing agencies provided to us. And so their sort of parameters for which they provide services to, i.e. State College providing services to Harrison College Township, are what is included within the data set. And so it wasn't on us to try to define that for them, but instead to receive the information that they shared with us.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Others? I think that's it, Dr. Cunningham. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good session. Okay. Move on to the Climate Action Adaptation Plan. This item has a motion.
Mr. Chair, this is where you wanted to insert the Lanternfly presentation.
Okay, sorry. Laura, you doing that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Basically, I'm going to hand it directly over to Molly Sterniolo and let her pronounce her name and give us some information. She's going to keep it really brief for us and hit the high points and kind of get the ball rolling here for us in Center County with getting some education going. And then if still available, there may be a farmer that might want to just briefly mention why it's really important for us as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Molly Sterniolo. Thank you, Molly.
And thank you very much. Can everyone see my screen correctly?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
We can see it, but it's not quite in the slide mode yet. But we do. Yep, there you go.
Okay. Okay. This way, I'm not able to see my notes. Let me see if there's a way.
And we could also see it the other way too, if that's. I think if you can present it that way, that's also fine.
Okay, are you seeing my notes on this slide?
No.
We don't see your notes, but we see your slide very well.
Yes, sir.
Very good, okay, that will work. Hello everyone, thank you for inviting me to come to your meeting tonight. My name is Molly Sterniolo and I'm the Master Gardener Coordinator for Penn State Extension in Central County. And I'm here to talk about the spotted lanternfly. The spotted lanternfly is an invasive insect that is native to China. It was first detected in Berks County, Pennsylvania in September of 2014. The spotted lanternfly feed on sap of the plants. This, one second, please. Okay, here we go. They feed on sap of over 70 plant species, many different plants, including maples, black walnut, and other important crops. Spotted lanternfly feeds. The insect excretes honeydew, which is a sugary substance. The honeydew builds up and promotes growth of a fungi called sooty mold. This can cover the plant, forest understory, patio furniture, cars, or anything else found below the spotted lanternfly feeding site. These insects are invasive and can be spread long distances by spreading infested material. Oops, my apologies. By spreading infested material from a location that is already infested to somewhere that's not. If allowed to spread in the United States, this pest will impact the country's grape, orchard, and logging industries. If not contained, the spotted lanternfly potentially could harm Pennsylvania's economy of at least $324 million per year, according to a study carried out by economists at Penn State. Spotted lanternfly is currently found in 34 counties in Pennsylvania. They are all under a state-imposed quarantine. You can find, this is a life cycle summary. You can find the egg masses beginning in September. The hatch and first instar is in May and June. From the first to third instar, you can see here that the insects are black with white dots. In the fourth instar, from July to September, the insect is a bright red color with the same white spots. The adults will hatch from July to September. Oh, my apologies, I'm making mistakes. The adults are about 1 inch long. They're actually smaller than they look. On the screen here, you would think they were much bigger. Some people think the insect is quite beautiful, but it is actually quite destructive. You can see from these photos of the egg masses on the left that these egg masses would blend well into tree bark. Egg masses contain 30 to 50 eggs each. The best way to destroy the egg masses is to scrape them into a container filled with isopropyl alcohol. For adults, nymphs, 2 adults, stomp them out. Any way that they can be destroyed, the most positive way to kill a spotted lanternfly is to just squish it. There are other ways to help combat the spotted lanternfly, and if you look at the Penn State Extension Spotted Lanternfly website, there is so much more information. So to go on with my basic summary, this photo shows the spread through the Northeast. And remember, this insect has only been in our county for only 7 years. Here's a map of Pennsylvania. The purple is existing counties in quarantine, and the blue counties were added to quarantine in 2021. You can see here that the infestation is very close to Centre County. So what do? We have to get the word out. Centre County residents must be aware of this invasive insect before it gets here. Penn State has a checklist to use when traveling to other counties. And reporting sightings, if you do see spotted lanternfly, the number is 1-888 bad fly or 888-422-4666. 3359. Any efforts that residents can make in destroying the lanternfly or its egg masses will help reduce populations on property and in community. You can find out more information from the Penn State Extension website, extensionpsu.edu/spotted-lanternfly.
Thank you so much, Molly, and I'd like to give a moment to Barb Christ and Elwin Stewart from Happy Valley Vineyard. They're also here to join us just to say just a quick word about their concerns. Also, I wanted to add, I had been traveling this summer and I got to witness a very bad infestation in part of our state over the summer, and really, the impact in neighborhoods that have been planted with maples was pretty severe in a very short period of time. So there are multiple municipal concerns about this as well in terms of early detection and intervention, and also perhaps planning. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Elwin and Barb. Welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Laura, for bringing this to the attention of the leadership, and also Molly for a great presentation. So we're the farmers that brought this to the table, and it's not only from the ecological standpoint that we're concerned, but also economic. We do farm, we make our living from the soil, and in that soil we grow grapes. And grapevines are very expensive, and they produce us over the past 10 years an income that, gross income that has varied from $350,000 to $650,000 a year. And that is fairly substantial for a small mom and pop operation. So we're concerned about our potential livelihood into the future when this insect arrives, and it is here. By the way, there have been formal reports right here in our neighborhood. So this is a very big issue, I think, for all of us. It'll have a negative impact on homeowners, through killing trees, shrubs, and certainly farmers like ourselves, it's going to have a devastating impact. And anything that can be done, I hope it is. We know what means that we have to employ. At best, they're less effective than they should be or could be. Barb has some comments.
We have been proactive in trying to educate consumers that come to our winery. We've reached out through our newsletter since about 2018. We've been putting information out for people to recognize the insect and what they can do about it, how to report it. So we've been very proactive. When people come in from out of the area, I ask where they're from and do they know about the spotted lanternfly. Some do, some do not. And we, as a business, we have had to go through a process so that we are certified, so that they know that we're taking care of our vehicles when we're traveling in and out of quarantine areas, just like Penn State staff do. So we're doing all those things, but I'm sure we know there's a lot of other people that are not doing those kinds of things, and we know the insect has been traveling up through the 322 corridor with the Ailanthus, the tree of heaven that you see along 322, also along the railroads. That's a fact.
And in our township.
Yeah, now they're in our township. They were a block away the other day from our vineyard.
Thank you so much, Barb and Elwin. And just to reemphasize, I think the main message here is to really get that education out there to our residents, to be vigilant, to report sightings, and to take steps to intervene, because there are steps that we can take. It's going to take a village, and folks in the Harrisburg area learned that when the infestation descended upon them, and folks were scrambling to figure out what to do. So just bringing this to the forefront. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask, but also in the interest of time, we've got resources now on the table, so we can also move forward via each municipality. Chair, if you entertain any questions, I see Pam Steckler does have one.
All right, go ahead. I don't see the hand, go ahead.
Pam, sorry, Pam's hand was up, there it is.
Pam?
Unmute.
Don't forget to unmute, Pam.
Unmute, Pam. There you go.
I'll just be really quick. I'm wondering if there's any way of getting things like PSAs, public service announcements out, like on radio, I don't know what TV, maybe public TV, you know, some way to kind of get it out quick and have people hear it a number of times so it gets stuck in their head and they know what to look for. That's just
That's a great idea, Pam, and I think Penn State as a partner could probably help promote the transfer, the non-transfer of lanternfly while they're promoting safe travels from other areas. That might be one way to reach a very huge population in a fun kind of a way. But I think that's a good idea. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for allowing this time. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Barb and Elwin.
Thank you. Let's move on to number 8, the climate action and adaptation plan. There was a motion, we would entertain a motion on that. Someone?
I move that the general forum receive the draft Center Region Climate Action and Adaptation Plan and refer it to the Center Region municipalities for review, and further that the comments be referred to the Sustainability Planner by 5 p.m. Friday, October 29, 2021.
Second.
Second we have, okay. Discussion? Either Pam or Eric?
Mr. Chair, this, as the motion indicates, is a request to refer this to the municipalities. Over the past few weeks, Pam Adams has made presentations to a number of committees in the COG, and now it's time for the discussion with the municipalities. Those dates have already been set and are in the packet. If anybody desires, Pam is with us while on vacation tonight to say a few words about the process, but if the general forum is ready to vote, that would speed things along.
Other discussion? All in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Thank you. Okay. 2022 COG program plan and capital improvement with Eric and Joe.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. This item is an informational item that has been referred to the general forum. This kind of summarizes and wraps up the program plan process. The comment guide with staff responses was in your packet. It's been referred by the Finance Committee and General Forum, and Executive Committee to the General Forum. Last Thursday, the Finance Committee began its review of the detailed budget, and it's also been referring to the comments in the comment guide. So the process is now underway, and this is an informational item. Joe and I are here if there are any questions.
There is no motion on this. This is discussion. Does someone? Laura? Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to make a brief comment about this that has been kind of discussed in executive, maybe in our board, but if I wanted to make a reference to an item that kind of got me on this thought process to present this comment here tonight, it would be in the comment guide, item 110, which was just a note. It wasn't a question to us, it was just a note. But in that note.
Page number, Laura?
15.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And the reason, it had a lot of content in it. I'll briefly read a part of it. After the completion of Whitehall Road Regional Park Phase 1, the completion of Millbrook Marsh Nature Center Spring Creek Education Building, and completing the majority of the task list from the Center Region Parks, Rec, and Open Space Comprehensive Study, the Parks Capital Committee and CRPR Authority should consider hiring a consultant to review the master plans and Phase 2 plans for John Hess, Oak Hall, and Whitehall Road Regional Park. So that's a lot. That's a lot of information right there. And it wasn't in a question, it was in a note. And the note was that we should consider hiring a consultant. So this kind of like got me to thinking about a lot of the comments that I think our board has made and I've made in COG committees, which is I really want us to think very proactively about getting all of the things into the CIP that we are talking about. And so whether that means a method similar to Ferguson uses, like we put a lot of our stuff in year 5 that we're not sure where we want it to fall, and then we have a section that says things that aren't in the CIP that we want to think about including in the CIP. And what those two elements do is they help us use all of this information that we've gathered in all these studies. We've got the fire study, the park study, this study, and now we've got the planning agency study. Putting all of them somewhere, anywhere in the CIP as a placeholder, and including also any staff additions that we are thinking about. So for example, in the Parks Comp Plan, I believe there might be 16 staff members that are supposed to be added over 10 years. That's a lot of staff members. So what we kind of do is we go at COG, we kind of go from 0 to 60, we have it in the study somewhere, and then it goes into year 1 in the budget. So what I'm suggesting, and I wanted to bring to general forum, and thank you for allowing me to kind of elaborate on this a minute, is that we, as a COG, should put all of the items that we're really thinking about or in the future somewhere in that CIP. So it can be a planning tool and a communication tool, especially for new elected officials, but also to facilitate conversations and planning among us here now. So I would have a motion to formalize that, which would be that we should add those things, and I could spell them out as staff, anything recommended in the studies that we've done and spent money on and approved, and things that we are currently talking about as a feasible plan in the next 5 years. So I would make that motion if folks feel like they're ready for that, but I don't want to force it on folks. I want us to all feel like we have ownership over that idea as a group plan. So that was my big.
You just froze it off. We have a motion.
It's more of a high level comment than on, it might relate then to a comment about the food truck and how, had we put that a couple years out in the CIP and we could talk about it and think about it, and the staffing for HR and the staffing for admin, and we kind of knew that was coming, but now, oh, here it is. Let's get those things in the CIP. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We have 2 ways. Elliot first.
This new motion, wouldn't it have to be added to the agenda?
It's not a whole agenda item, I don't think. It's just, it would be for an addition to the CIP.
Vote on a new motion would be on the agenda. I think it belongs somewhere, but we have some new rules.
I would defer to Vice Chair Rich Frank. I think he has a fair amount of understanding about how we're working on that new agenda item, and I didn't understand it to include if there was a motion that would be added, but just a topic of discussion, but perhaps that's my misunderstanding.
Mr. Frank, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I don't know that we've gotten to the fleshed out of the new agenda item. A new motion could be considered new business. It could also be considered an extension of the agenda, but in the room, Ms. Lafer and Ms. Del Corso have comments.
I offer the floor to Teresa first.
Either one of you.
I don't think Laura is wrong, but I would make it a very simple final page, like a long-range planning for the MPO or something, that literally says long-range planning. And anything that we're not going to have to do for 4 or 6 or however many years can literally put on that last page with what it is what projections we might have for it. A very brief line in the matrix saying why we think we'll need it. And that way, as somebody is coming through and learning what we're doing for this year or next year or whatever, they have a look and they can see where is this going to, and they can come back to that at another point during a larger discussion. So things could go on and off it. But I think it could be made very simple. We have a 2 or 4 or 5 year plan, and all we really need to do is attach to that long-range planning anything where we see it's going to go beyond those dates, whatever those dates may be. It puts the information where she's right, it should be there, it shouldn't come around at some point in the future and surprise all of us. And that includes older members of COG as well as the new ones. But it shouldn't be something that's up in front and center and that's big and time consuming. It should be available as that last page of the future planning, nice and simple.
Scott, who was the second individual?
Danelle.
Estelle Corso.
Thank you. I also appreciate this as a simple, if there's mention of things, put it in. I'm not sure if the timing is right for this year because trying to do it for the first time, it's kind of through its process, I think. But I definitely appreciate it and maybe something we should pay attention to over the next year to help identify items to put it in there. So I appreciate that suggestion, Laura.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
In the absence of the finance chair this evening, the vice chair will commit the finance committee to including this discussion as part of their wrap up. And we can put that in there as a possible suggestion to staff. We'll go through the members and see if there's support. I think there will be, but we'll definitely include that if that's agreeable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rich. That sounds great. That sounds great to me, and I appreciate everybody's comments. And I also agree with complete simplicity, and I also agree. I'm sorry, I forget now what I agree with. I agree with all of that. Thank you very much.
Other comments on the 15 pages of program plan? I assume everyone has read 15 pages. And there was no motion required, so we can move on. Okay. The COG building lease, Rich Frank, Chair of Facility. Rich?
Yes, Mr. Chair. As part of our standing up and everything, one of the things that was important was getting our arms around the various documents that govern the relationship of the assets of the COG. One of those was the COG building lease in 2008.
There is a motion. Does someone want to move that?
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion that the general forum, as recommended by the Facilities, Finance, and Executive Committees, supports and endorses the decision by the Executive Committee to direct staff to draft, review, and present purchase agreement documents that transfer ownership of the COG building to the COG at the end of the lease in May 2028.
Second. You have a second?
Second, Betsy Whitman.
Let's proceed with discussion.
Okay, very good, thank you. So back in 2018, the Facilities Committee started asking questions about this document. In particular, it is silent to what is supposed to occur at the end of the lease. Having some familiarity with leases and everything, there's a couple different documents and the intent of the parties and all this good kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, we started coming around to what is on the public record. And one of those items is the county tax card, which is just the parcel for this parcel. There is no question in anybody's mind that COG owns the land that this building is on. In the county's tax card, it shows COG also owning the building. The other item that we came around was the audited financial statements of each of the municipalities. and that they were treating this building differently on almost every one of them. And then finally, you're trying to, you follow the money. So for those not familiar, what occurs now is that the COG pays rent, and that rent is credited against municipal contributions. So if the lease is up, then the municipalities would actually have to give COG the money to pay the rent. And in addition, owning the land, there would be a potential land lease cost. Rather than elected officials without the real grounding in the subject matter, trying to do a best guesstimate, we asked the managers to, as a group, to review the situation and provide a recommendation. Their recommendation was that at the end of the lease, that the building be transferred to the COG. Again, the members are COG, so you're not really losing anything. And that's what today's motion is towards. The cleanest way to do that when you're transferring an asset is a purchase agreement. There will be nominal dollars exchanged, but at the end, the COG will have it. The COG will be responsible for everything going forward.
Thank you, Rich. Other questions of Rich?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Graham has a question.
Well,
Yes, Mr. Graham.
I have a question. I have some reservations on this, as I expressed in I was the one lone vote against this, but I'm not against this resolution. I think we can look at it. The issue is, I don't believe COG can own anything. I don't believe the COG has the ability to go through the state. We went through this before. COG cannot own anything. So I don't know how we're going to transfer this to COG, because COG isn't an entity. COG is nothing. It's a group of people. Now, I'm curious to see how, I got a copy of the deed, I got a copy of the deed, both of them, and it just specifies COG ownership is through all the municipalities. That is COG. So I'm not sure what the advantage is or disadvantage is. We'll wait and see when the resolution comes out. I don't know that COG can own it. I think, unless the rules have changed in the last few years, but years ago we went through this, through the state, they didn't recognize COG, so COG can't own it. Number one. The other second thing is, it was set up that each municipality would build this building, and we receive rent back from this building from the building, which is, some of it is our money, some of it is from our enterprise things that would help pay for this building. The taxpayers pay. We're getting, Harris Township receives $17,000 back. It's not a credit. We actually get that back in the credits for this. So we have at least one enterprise thing, which is code. So I'm curious to see how that's going to be handled. That still should be township money. So I'm curious to see how the resolution comes out. I'm a little skeptical right now, but I read the thing from our attorney, and all he says it's a policy. See, whatever you want to do, you do. Basically, it's typical legal where it doesn't say anything. So I'm curious to how, when this comes back, what's going to happen, and I don't know how COG can own anything. So we'll wait and see. That's my comment.
The COG already owns things. The COG already owns things.
COG does not own anything.
Yes.
Scott,
and with regard to the code money, it would, I assume,
Well,
our executive director will
yes.
charge a good rent to our good friends in code, and that will then become a
Well,
credit
we'll work that
on
out,
the
because
entire budget.
that was meant to repay municipalities for what they spent on this building. And I don't think we made that money back yet. We'll see. That's all.
Okay, good. We have a motion and a second. Everybody to vote. All in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Okay. University report. Sharima, are you on?
I'm on. Good evening. I hope everybody's doing well. I just have a few updates. As you know, we had some interim suspension of 117 students recently. I sent that article out to everyone. And our human resources is currently looking at employee testing data to determine who's not in compliance with testing. So for those of you who don't know, if you're not vaccinated at the university, you are required to do weekly testing. And if you are not in compliance and doing your weekly testing, you are eligible to be suspended temporarily. So in addition to that, we are continuing to provide COVID vaccines. We are also ramping up for flu vaccines. So one clinic will be held on September 30th and another one on October 25th. Our positivity rate is 0.7% at this time. And we're happy to say that for our residential students, we're going to be at 90% of our residential students vaccinated. So very happy about that. Also, our non-residential students are at 85% vaccinated, and our employees are at 80.4% vaccination rates. And I believe part of that is low is because of the union employees that are particularly low in their vaccination. If you want the most up-to-date information, please go to virusinfo.psu.edu. Also, I talked to Eric Norberg a little bit about us doing a presentation for COG, just an update on NG2V. So we're going to work on getting that scheduled, and it'll be just some updates about what the consultant is working on and where we're going next. So just wanted you all to know that is still in the works, and I think that's all I have for this evening.
Questions of Serena? Yes, Janet.
How do you define residential students? So many of the students don't live in the dorms, they live in the town.
The ones that are on campus.
So that percentage is really, in some ways, kind of meaningless because of the number that are in the town. Do you have any, do you do any attempts to test the students that live off campus? Non-residential?
Yeah, all the students are required to show vaccination status. If they don't, they will be tested. So as I mentioned, 90% of the students on campus are vaccinated. The ones who live off campus, 85% of them are vaccinated. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Others? More yellow hands? Not seeing any, okay. Let's go to the school. Gretchen, are you on, Gretchen?
She is not, Mr. Chair.
Okay. What about Mr. Norm Morgan, ED report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have the monthly agency reports in the packet, previously distributed. I'd be happy to answer any questions I can or call on the appropriate agency director. Otherwise, I don't have anything else to add. And if you are then ready for agency director reports, Joe has a quick update for the group. So, any questions I can answer?
Not hearing any, let's move to committee reports.
Do you want to call on Joe for agency director report?
Any questions on agency?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Vigilone is going to make a presentation for the agency director report.
Oh, okay. Oh, hi Joe.
Hi Danny, how you doing? Good evening everybody, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to give you a quick update about what's been going on over the past year or so in the finance department. We don't talk too much outside of finance committee on this. The first things were different impacts and workflows. So I'll try to keep this real quick. In terms of financial record keeping, we are, between Terry and I, maintaining a general ledger system with 4 employers, 100 plus full-time and part-time employees, plus seasonals, over 3 different payrolls, 3 different EINs, along with 2,000 accounts and over 2,500 pages of general ledger data. We had just received all 4 of our annual audits, and all for the 6th year in a row, unqualified opinions and no management letter comments. And the finance agency did redesign the detailed summary budget over the past year. In terms of finance priorities, over the past year, some things that we've accomplished were the leading of the lead staff support for the facilities committee until the hiring of Lou Brungard. We've been the lead office providing staffing to the 15-member SPPA working group, a liaison between the IT service provider and COG, and also the lead purchasing department, reworking electricity contracts. In terms of finance committee priorities, we've accomplished the reporting on the library, fire, and park strategic plan updates to the committee, and we completed the redesign of the budget documents. Currently underway, we're reviewing various COG formulas. The IT study was just let out and that project is starting. Eric has been updating you on the strategic plan. And we are beginning to monitor the financial status of the code agency a little more closely with the hope to start in the near future a service delivery model plan and rolling that out. And we do realize that we still have some pending work to do, including the fund balance policy, fleet management plan, the funding of COG capital budgets, discussing that, and then the review of the core merit calculations. Going back to the funding of the COG capital budgets, that is going to be that's going to be developed very closely with the facilities coordinator and the agency directors as we move to a new theory in terms of maintaining COG facilities from break fix to lowest total cost of ownership. And just finally, I want to give a special thanks out to a few people. Kerry Asendorf, who is the better half of the COG finance team. He's been a rock and he's brought so much to the office in terms of the operations. Most of the 2,600 pages of general ledger data is his work. Becca, a lot of people don't understand or don't realize the close relationship between HR and finance, especially related to payroll and benefits. And the efforts that she puts forth can never be discounted. And then Scott, we'd be lost with you on the committee side. We could not have handled the transition from in-person to hybrid and remote without your leadership. So I just want to thank everybody and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Joe. Questions for Joe? Okay, committee reports. Mr. Frank, Executive Committee, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think the agenda covers, and the agenda itself covers a lot. Obviously, we added the new agenda item to that, and we road tested that this evening. The other thing I would note is there's a fair amount of matters of record that I would call to the members' attention. A lot of time went into this month's executive committee meeting. I think we were a 2-hour job this time we got through. Just a heads up, next month we will be having a vote on the Parks Maintenance Building lease, and we will be road testing our unit voting procedure.
Mr. Myers, Finance.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Myers is celebrating his anniversary this evening. So in his absence, I will reference to the agenda, but I will also add that we had our first review meeting on the 23rd. At that, we did code, admin, and a lot of the peripheral funds of admin. We will have our next meeting on September 30th, 9 to 12. All meetings are being recorded by CNET, and the first meeting is already up on the website if you should be so interested.
Good, thank you. Happy anniversary of Human Resources, Mr. Stubbs.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, we've been spending the majority of our efforts trying to come up with ways to incentivize the remaining unvaccinated COG employees to go and get vaccinated. We've come up with various ideas, but we are still in the research and discussion parts of our process. So, and other than that, I'll just defer to what is in the agenda. So, thank you.
Keep up the good work. We need to get those numbers down.
Thank you. Yes, we're working hard trying to get things accomplished.
Parks Capital, Laura?
Thank you, Chair. So I think that the write-up in the agenda is fantastic, so you can refer to that. I'll make two comments. First, I'm sure the committee will look forward to, and the general forum, of course, will look forward to Shreema's presentation of MG2V, and we have a really nice letter put together, so we're excited then about sending that letter out and continuing that partnership with Penn State to preserve our watershed. And then, just importantly, we did have to reschedule our meeting because it was scheduled for Veterans Day, I believe. Anyway, COG is closed on the day our meeting was scheduled, so just a heads up to the managers and to the members of the Parks Capital Committee, we are meeting on Tuesday, November 9th at 3:00 p.m. So that's a very unique time for us. That's Tuesday, November 9th at 3:00 p.m. And that's it, thank you.
You want to do public safety also?
I sure do. Again, the public safety write-up is very well done and captures what was discussed at our meeting. I wanted to mention here that our November meeting, our joint meeting with PSNE has now also been scheduled. It's noted here, it will be announced. That will be also November 9th at 12 noon. And that's unique because typically we meet at 12:15, but that meeting starts at 12 noon, that joint meeting, November 9th at 12 noon. Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa?
Yeah.
Public service, environment, two.
Public services and transportation and land use. We spent a lot of time discussing biking, and I want to make clear, because we've had a lot of questions recently in the borough and some of the online chat groups locally, and also from some of our newest members who have not gone through this cycle and seen this before. We have a fairly robust biking program in the region and the surrounding region as well. The COG has some excellent maps that you can get to pretty easily from the first page of the COG website, and they are the kind of things that you can build on. So you can look at the whole map of the region and the state, or you can say, what's a good place for me to take my 10-year-old? It isn't too hard or isn't too dangerous or whatever. So for those of you who are interested in using your bikes, whether as commuters or family and fun, we have a lot of options for you, and we discussed a lot of them about them. And we discussed the fact that we will be having a new center region bike plan, which will cover another 2 years coming up. We will be planning it. So that's what we spent a lot of our time on, the bike plan and its specifics. And again, you go online and you come to the COG pages. We also have an expert who will be retiring soon. I don't think Trish didn't retire already, did she? Okay, so Trish Meeks, if you want to ask somebody for details on how to get around through those maps and things, she's the person to call or email. Second important topic is a new one, and that's the development of utility-scale solar. And while the region has a number of things that have been helping individual businesses and families, homes, this is a much larger set of options, and we want to discuss how we would do zoning and planning for this before people just go in and plop them down. So that is something that we are beginning to work on, and I do know that several other groups in the region are doing the same thing and having meetings on it. So we need to make sure that we all talk to each other. And the last one is housing. And there's arguments as to what kind of housing, whether you call it workforce or affordable or any of another half dozen or so possibilities. And this is, again, the committee thinks that we need to have a regional approach to this. And I don't disagree, I just don't know as yet how that will work as opposed to the last regional group, which was the Affordable Housing Coalition. But we would like to work with the county and each of the varying townships to find a way to provide zoning and building access for things smaller than your basic $800,000 McMansion, or even your $500,000 McMansion. houses that actual people can afford to buy and live in with their children, or their parents, or their retirement, or whatever it happens to be. So this is a returning topic that we're gonna have to redefine, and hopefully we can do that with the aid of various land trusts and housing options that exist in the county already. And those are our major topics at this point.
Thank you, Teresa. Mr. Frank Facilities, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the summary included in the agenda properly covers our September 7th meeting.
Okay, Betsy Whitman, Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would like to, well, a couple of things I would like to add to the discussion that was presented in the agenda are, one, a huge shout out to Pam Adams for all the work that she's done compiling what we will be sending to the general forum, which is the Climate Action and Adaptation program. She has been working at this for a couple of years, as have many people, and she's pulled together information from dozens of sources, including the Technical Advisory Committee, a community survey, public forum, interviews with stakeholders, and last but not least, all the members of the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee. So we need to give her a big round of recognition or applause, and I look forward to getting feedback from municipalities in the general forum on that. The second thing that I would like to mention is that, as we all know, the next stage of the climate action is actually going to be action, we hope, and that is going to be one of the toughest steps for us to take, but I'm excited to announce that we already taking one of the steps, that is in working as a partner with Solar United Neighbors and forming a solar cooperative, and that means Center County Solar and EV, or Electric Vehicle Charger Co-op. And I just want to give everyone an update that we need 30 members of the co-op to sign on as members. People are not obligated to go through a solar purchase, but they are indicating their vested interest in doing so. We have the minimum 30 members, so that we are now in the stage where we can send out for proposals, RFPs. Those come back, we'll have a committee look over them. I also wanted to note that we've had contacts, and I say we, this is Solar United Neighbors is doing much of the administrative work on this. We've had contacts from 89 people in Center County who are interested. So with the wing and a prayer, we will have some concrete action on this, the goal connected with the residential solar, and this will also be for small businesses. The goal in the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan calls for a 30% reduction in solar and, 30% reduction in energy in residential uses. So here's hoping that this will mean some of that.
Thank you, Beth. Pam, you have your hand up. You have a question? Pam?
I think I got myself unmuted.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to comment also on the CAAP. I've been reading it, and it is an amazing document. It's very detailed, it's very professional, and I'm really excited that we're going to be putting this in place. Obviously, I'm pretty impressed with it. I think that Pam Adams and her whole team did a great job on it, and they're still tweaking, but we'll be also having comments at the municipality committee.
Thank you.
My question is, at the bottom of tonight's agenda, I had found a link to Whitehall Regional Park. and I hadn't seen phase one map yet. And when I looked at it, I was a little horrified that there was still parking. That there are these two gigantic parking spaces, I don't know what you'd call them, parking lots, that added up to like 570 spaces. Now, if we're working on trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, isn't this kind of the antithesis to be wanting to attract that many vehicles into the center region? I mean, is there a way to like revisit this plan? Is there a way to go with one of those parking lots for the first phase and leave the second one for 2 and 3, or, you know, just to see what's going on, or keep one all grass, and if they need it, they can always put up concrete curbing for it. Excuse me. I don't know enough, you know, I'm new, so I don't really know enough to know if it's written in stone or if we could revisit it or reopen it in light of.
Bring that question up with your Ferguson Township rep to the Park Capital. That's been talked about, so I think we have a good handle on that one, so.
So, I mean, in terms of the CAAP.
Yeah, well.
Be brought up.
I think we've adequately discussed that item, so. Okay, let's move on to other business. There are 11 items in the matter of record. Does anyone have anything to say on those items? If not, we're turning to
Mr.
page
Chair.
15.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Del Corso.
Hi, I just took a quick look and I just wanted a clarification. I think there might be a typo in letter B, matter of record. Penn State University staff possibly giving a presentation at, it says the October 27th meeting. I think that's supposed to be October 25th. Can I just get clarification on that? Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
One other hand, okay. Anita?
Yes. Wait a minute, let me lower my hand here. Yes, thank you. I wanted to second what Teresa Laffer had spoken about in terms of the regional emphasis needed for housing, and to give a public expression of thanks to some extraordinary work done by Nicole Pollock, the senior planner for CRPA. If you had a chance to view the very short CNET videos that have been produced by Patton Township and CNET to increase public awareness of what we're calling attainable housing, you might find the narrator to have what was deemed by the CNET folk to be a pleasing, authoritative voice, and that is Nicole Pollock, who not only identified the scripting and the pictures and worked with CNET to put these videos together, but actually went into their studio to do the recording. She's been the co-chair of the Housing Task Force all this year, and has not only staffed the task force, but has been an active guider in terms of the discussion. So I just wanted to give a note of recognition for the outstanding work that the Center Region Planning Agency and Nicole have done in helping us get the word out for hopefully public acceptance of the need for this kind of housing. And we look forward to the regional work and collaboration that will be coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nina. Item 19 is a single word. I want to warn you, I will be back in the forum room next month. Get ready for it. I'm coming back. Have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
I know you're all interested. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Recording stopped.